Good evening and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see this evening, I'm going to be talking about The Coming for MYFAROG. MYFAROG is a mythic fantasy role-playing game, and The Coming is the post-apocalyptic setting for that game system. So before I actually go into the booklet itself, I wanted to switch views here. I'm going to show you two different editions of the book. That way you know which book you actually have and whether or not you might want to replace it. So let me switch views here. I'll go to my larger screen here. So over the course of a couple years, I ended up replacing some of the splat books for Mythic Fantasy role-playing game. And one of the books I ended up getting back when I was still playing with MYFAROG 2.4 was I picked up The Coming. And the way you can tell you have an older edition of this is that the bottom part here is a black and the back cover is black, and you can see the newer version. I know it's kind of hard to see here, but you can see it's definitely a more charcoal cover on the or back cover on the newer edition. Secondly, as you dig into this, you'll see that this is 45 pages long, and the newer version was written for either 2.6, certainly for 2.6. So this was written for 2.4, possibly 2.5. So if you're using MYFAROG 2.4 or 5, this book you can still use. But this one here is going to refer to 2.6, 2.7, and not quite 3.0. You'll have to double check the page numbers, but this one here is 74 pages long. Now, comparing the two booklets, I've looked at both, and the main difference in the page numbers is the fact that the font size between the two is dramatically different. So I'm going to switch and show you that view very quickly. So here's the 2.4 version, or potentially 2.5 as well, and you can see the introduction here, and I will bring this one here. It doesn't look like it's that much different, but it does make a difference in the layout of the page. As you can see here, you can start to see that they're adding in some of the how to use these components, and this one here has a whole other paragraph. So font size is the main difference that you'll also notice. The other thing that I realized was that I went to just one section, the round, and I started looking, and where it says here to refer to certain pages, like check morale on page 35, and this one here, same section, will say, this one here says, let's see, check page 42. All right, so the booklets themselves, or the rule books, and I'll switch to a different screen here. This right here is my my 2.7, and it does correspond if I go to page 42. Actually, let me get there. If I go to 42, and on 42 I can see that morale begins down over here. So definitely corresponds with it. One other thing about this is that if you are playing with an older version of MYFAROG, and I'm going to do a separate video comparing 2.7 with 3.0, but even 2.7, which is the Thulian setting, does not have in the 2.7 edition does not have flaws included in it, and so you will need the supplement to include with this for flaws. Character flaws are built into 3.0, and so you no longer need the supplement for the purpose of including the optional rule for flaws for 3.0. They're already built into this book. So, that all being said, we're going to go to taking a look at The Coming. So here is the newer version of The Coming. It's built around either 2.6 or 2.7, and we go through and there's an introduction, and basically, if you read through this, basically all of the calamities of a modern civilization are kind of coming to a head, and that's the premise for this apocalyptic setting. Was that fossil fuels are running low, consumerism has depleted most of the natural resources of the world, big corporations have wrecked the environment. There have been several nuclear, power plant disturbances or meltdowns and such. There have been several tactical nukes blown, set off, throughout the world. And there has been some manipulations of vaccines and such that helped to create what is called greed, which is a virulent disease that that had no longer been contained, and it got out of the laboratory and started to spread around mostly the third world, but it's starting to encroach upon second and first world nations, and this is resulting in creating kind of like a zombie-like condition that that the humans infected with it are kind of rising up and just looking to mindlessly destroy everything that comes in their path. So it's kind of like a nuclear apocalypse, zombie apocalypse kind of setting going on. And the character generation or creation certainly differs in this, that you're not going to have many of the Iron Age skills and such. So it makes sense that various elements are going to be changed as far as character creation is concerned. The starting ages of characters is a little bit higher in a more modern setting than what you had in a much older age, like an Iron Age or semi-medieval setting. There's obviously advanced military equipment and technology that's going to be used. The talents change. So some talents are removed, other talents are included, such as aviators and pilots, and there's a different type of tracking that is used in this. Just looking through, very quickly, there are certainly more modernized versions of the traits and talents that the older game had used. So here's the flaw system that I had mentioned, and in the earlier versions, so 2.4, 5, 6, and 7, you do not have flaws in the MYFAROG system. Only in 3.0 are they included. So it makes sense that if you're still using one of those other versions, older editions, you should certainly pick up the Coming just for that purpose alone. And it's a very cheap splat book as well. It's, the last time I checked, it's certainly under, I'd say $8. It might even be around $6 on Amazon. I should have double checked. So there's a number of flaws, and the way the system here worked was that you would roll a d4, and then your character would either your player would either select the flaws that they have to make sure that they kind of meshed and made some sense, or they could randomly roll up to those 4 flaws. And then if they wanted to increase their number of flaws in exchange for getting getting an additional talent, for every 2 additional flaws they would gain a talent. That rule is slightly changed for MYFAROG, where they 3.0, where they just roll something differently, or they can just choose to take 2 flaws for 1 additional talent and work along that way. But it's also randomized as well. So new, modified, and removed skills. So animal handling is will now translate to riding, training, veterinary, domestication of animals. Computers is an add. Heavy weapons is now added. Small arms is now added. Driving, obviously, is added. Medicine replaces healing, and medicine includes first aid, general treatment, and surgeries. Science replaces alchemy, and it's all of the basic sciences. Music replaces flute playing, poetry, singing, and lyre playing. So music just in general allows for that particular skill to be used for a variety of things. Piloting, obviously, is a new talent that's added. Modified skills are mechanics, includes machines now. Foraging is much more difficult due to pollution, environmental destruction, and urbanization. Stamina is different. Stamina bonuses. Modern men do not have the same level of stamina that more ancient men had, and so it's reduced. Foraging is a little bit different. Remove skills, as I went over, where alchemy, flute playing, healing, lyre playing, poetry, religious tradition, writing is replaced with animal handling, and singing is replaced with music. There's an additional morale rule called suppression, and this is for fire suppression. So as we start getting into the effects of having, firearms, you're going to start to see some of those skills and supplemental rules included in the fact that, one of the primary weapons in the Coming is going to be the use of firearms rather than the use of, simply melee weapons. There's radiation rules, and it goes into the effects of various levels of radiation. Mental health is another addition that was in the Coming, and it might have been in one of the other supplements as well. I don't quite recall, but it was certainly introduced here. And I've always been a big fan of games that include mental health as for your character, where your character can, basically, slowly or very rapidly lose their minds, and And that goes back to Call of Cthulhu Second Edition, which was when I started playing that game back in the early 1980s. So I just love the mechanic. I love the idea of characters' mental health and well-being being a major factor in the game as well. And so there's the effects of losing your mental health points. New types of melee weapons. So the bayonet, a bayonet when it's attached to a rifle, baseball bats, cons, various new types of armor such as flak jackets and flak vests and full body armor, hazmat body armor, and Kevlar vests and Kevlar helmets and such. So you start to see a lot of the more modern technology, and we're talking about the technology of the, of the 2000s being included in here. So once, copper becomes a, you know, much more available as far as a form of currency because it's being salvaged and scavenged from, copper wiring and piping from, many of the buildings that have been destroyed. So ammunition type really determines the amount of damage that weapons do. So they didn't have to go into the various different models of a 22 long rifle, for instance. They just says, well, this is the cartridge and this is the damage that that cartridge is going to do. So you have 22s, you have 32s, 9 millimeters, 38 specials, 357s, 45 ACPs, 223s, the 30, the .30 cal, the 50 cal, the 50 multi-purpose cal, 12 gauge, 22 millimeter, the 20 millimeter. I mean, so now we're starting to get into grenade and rocket ammunition, possibly mortars as well, hand grenades, Molotov cocktails, and then there's a long list of different types of weapons. So, two-handed small arms. You have an anti-material rifle. You have assault rifles normal, assault rifles light, assault rifles compact, assault rifle marksman, automatic rifle normal, automatic battle rifles, battle rifle normal, marksman, and such bolt actions. So you have a full variety of very generically named rifles and shotguns and handguns and such. So you don't have to actually get into the actual model and make as far as them having different capabilities. You're just going to go into the round type and then the generic weapon type that you're using. Heavy weapons, you get into grenade launchers, rifle grenade launchers, rocket launchers, heavy machine guns. Rules on automatic fire, including modifiers for the amount of recoil, number of rounds fired per round, and then the level of burst that's actually being used. So very short burst, which this could be like the 3 round short burst. A short burst is more of a human controlled amount of the burst. Medium, long, very long. That's you're starting to get to like belt fed. Extreme burst and maximum burst. I have not. Let's see if I can find the situations when a maximum burst is actually applied. I don't believe it really is explained too much there as far as what is the difference between a long burst and a maximum burst, and in what situation that might actually be done under. So there's There's scarring, so that's an interesting little mechanic that they've thrown in there, or Varg has thrown in there. So bitter enmity, scarring, the effects on the mind, infections, and so on. So here, and like I said, this is an unscripted and unchained, review of the supplement, and I don't necessarily have to like everything that I see in a game, and I could still review it and still say, listen, I think this is something that's really useful to have, especially if you're looking to play some other, use this as a supplement along with the other game books. So one of the downsides to this particular setting is that I think there was just too much going on, like too many different calamities taking place. In one sense, it gives you a lot of freedom to say, well, in this particular area that your players are in, this is the effect, and who was the result of that, that portion, and then you could work against them. In others, in other places, you might have multiple, or you might just choose, I'm going to run my setting where, the main issue was the scarcity of fossil fuels, and not having any other kind of a fallback for that problem. And it kind of runs to the same thing with, there are many factions that are either aggressors or just part of the root cause for the crap basically hitting the fan. And so the World Health Organization is one, the U.S. government becoming extremely part of the industrial military complex is another. The CIA kind of going rogue. We have Hydra, which is getting pulled out of you know comic books. Really, is what I think of when I hear Hydra. Uh, Russia and China, and North Korea and Syria, all, Iran, all being problems. And many of these are getting pulled out of, the headlines of today or over the last couple of years. There are other, there were other Islamic groups that are obviously rising up and causing issues mostly in the Middle Eastern countries, but also, throughout Europe and everything. And again, pulled straight from the headlines. The European Union is a faction, and one that is also, in some cases, an antagonist to some of these things going on. Some of these negative effects happening throughout the world. There's basically everyone, and everything and everyone is kind of going on in the background and stories of what's turned the world upside down. So the other the other issue that I have is that there are no vehicles included in the system, and it was explained that because of such a reduction in the availability of fossil fuels, that vehicles would have been very rare anyway, and so they're just not included. And that's something that I would hope would actually does find its way to being included, because there are other possibilities. I'm going to switch views here for a second. There are other possibilities for fuel to be used in vehicles. So, this book was probably written in 2015 or so. 2015. It was certainly produced and printed in 2016. And the idea that the total absence of fossil fuels is going to take vehicles off the road kind of just forgets about ethanol and other means of producing vehicles. So that's something that I would hope, if there is an updated version of the coming for for it to work along with 3.0, MYFAROG 3.0, that that would get introduced. But other than that, I mean, the some of the subsystems that are included in this game supplement, it really useful, especially if you're still using MYFAROG 2.7 or earlier, because those flaws really do give a character a lot of just a lot of depth to a character. And some of the other additions to the game system overall that this has, such as like the mental health, is another one that I really liked. And I've actually taken some of those some of these subsystems and built them into my MYFAROG 2.7 campaigns, which is a more Iron Age campaigns, and certainly going to include that in the 3.0, where the characters will have a mental health point system that they're using along with character flaws as well. So so as a supplement, it's really useful to get your hands on this, especially if you're playing an older version. And even with the newer version, I'd still highly recommend it, just in case you're looking, or you have a group that's looking to still continue using the MYFAROG system, but they want to use it in a different setting. And this kind of gives you some hints and tips on how to take at least some of the weapon technology. And once you have the base, you can always make modifications and add on to it or take away from it. And so it does allow you to move the game system forward through different time periods, and and start digging into the modern and postmodern era with this supplement. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Like it if you enjoyed it. Leave comments, anything that you have pertaining to this or to the game system. I am going to do a follow-up video where I'm comparing MYFAROG 2.7 to 3.0, because I've had some people mention in our Facebook group for MYFAROG gameplay. They were asking questions very specific to the two game systems and wondering which one should they consider getting if they can't get both. And so I'm going to do a detailed comparison between the two systems. And it's not just setting where they're a little bit different, but there is some game mechanic differences as well. So so I'm certainly going to get into that in the next video as well. So please leave your questions and comments. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and the channel's been growing, pretty well lately, and more comments and more likes is getting, I think, the channel more views overall. And I've been using a new system too, where it's kind of telling me how to set up different things so that it's hitting all these little check marks, high resolution thumbnails, and mentioning the keywords and the descriptions and such. So I've been messing around a little bit with that and trying to gauge whether or not that's getting the channel a bit more exposure. So once again, the end of another weekend, so I look forward to seeing you all on the gaming screen sometime very soon. Upcoming videos will be, as I mentioned, the MYFAROG, and also Red Dead Redemption 2 I will have it on my computer running by the 5th, I hope, by the 5th or the 6th, so you could look to see that coming up as well. So you'll have a good remainder of the weekend, and hope you have a good upcoming week. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You'll have a good night.